February 6, 1901, Volume 4. The perfect satisfaction of Jesus is finding himself in the soul. As I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus on coming told me, "My daughter, when my grace is in possession of more people, it celebrates more. It happens as to queens. The more maidens that hang upon their wishes and surround them like a crown, the more they enjoy and make feast. You, fix yourself in me. Look at me, and you will be so taken by me that everything material will drop dead for you. You must fix yourself in me so much as to draw me completely into yourself, in such a way that, finding myself in you, I may find in you my perfect satisfaction. So as I find in you all possible pleasures I could find in a human creature, what the others do to me cannot grieve me so much." And while saying this, he closed himself up in sight of me, and was all pleased. How fortunate I would consider myself if I arrived at drawing my beloved Jesus completely into myself. February 6, 1908, Volume 8. Signs to know whether the soul is in grace. As I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, the sign to know whether a soul is in my grace is that, as my grace communicates itself to her, the soul is ready to execute what grace wants, in such a way that the grace which was already in her interior and that which communicates itself afterwards hold hands, and united with the will of the soul, place themselves in the attitude of operating. If then she is not ready, there is much to doubt about. Grace is symbolized by electric current, which turns on only those things where preparations have been made to receive the electric current. But where these preparations are not present, or some wires are broken or consumed, even though there is current, the light cannot communicate itself." And he disappeared. February 6, 1919, Volume 12. How the soul and the divine will can form the hosts with which to nourish Jesus. I was fusing all of myself in my sweet Jesus, doing as much as I could in order to enter the divine volition, to find the chain of my eternal love, of the reparations, and of my continuous cry for souls, with which my always lovable Jesus longed for me from eternity. I wanted to chain my little love in time, together with that love with which Jesus longed for me eternally, to be able to give him infinite love, infinite reparations, substituting for everything, just as Jesus had taught me. While I was doing this, my sweet Jesus came in a hurry and told me, "My daughter, I'm very hungry." And he seemed to be taking many tiny little white balls from inside my mouth, eating them. Then, as if he wanted to satisfy his hunger completely, he entered into my heart, and with both hands he grabbed many crumbs, big and small, and he ate them hurriedly. Then, as if he was satiated, he leaned on my bed and told me, "My daughter, as the soul keeps enclosing my will and loves me, in my will she encloses me, and loving me she forms around me the accidents in which to imprison me, forming a host for me. So if she suffers, if she repairs, and so forth, and encloses my volition, she forms many hosts to communicate me, and to satisfy my hunger in a way which is divine and worthy of me. As soon as I see these hosts being formed within the soul, I go and grab them in order to feed myself, to satisfy my insatiable hunger, that the creature render me love for love. Therefore you can say to me, 'You have communicated me. I too have communicated you.' And I, 'Jesus, my hosts are your own things, while yours are still yours. so I always remain below you. And Jesus, for one who really loves me, I cannot consider this, nor do I want to. And then in my hosts I give you Jesus, and in yours you give the whole of Jesus as well. Do you want to see it? And I, yes. He stretched his hand into my heart, took a tiny little white ball, broke it, and another Jesus came out from within it. And he, did you see it? How happy I am when the creature arrives at being able to communicate myself. Therefore make me many hosts, and I will come to feed myself in you. You will renew for me the contentment, the glory, and the love of when I communicated myself in instituting my sacramental presence. February 6, 1927, Volume 20. Wherever the divine will is present, everything is present. Nothing can escape it. How one who possesses it lives in the communion of goods of her Creator. She receives love and happiness. She gives love and happiness. I was all immersed in the Supreme Volition, following its acts in order to constitute my self-act of each creature. And my sweet Jesus came out from within my interior, and stretching out his arms to me, hugged me tightly, pressing me all to himself. Now while Jesus was hugging me, all created things, the heavens, the sun, the sea, all of them, even the tiny little bird, placing themselves around Jesus, hugged me, wanting to repeat his act. They almost competed with each other. None of them wanted to be left behind. I remained confused in seeing all creation running toward me to hug me, and Jesus told me, "My daughter, when the soul lives in my will and I do an act toward her, even a simple kiss, one little word, all put themselves in motion to repeat my act. In fact, since one is the will for the soul, for me and for them, all have the right to associate themselves with me, to do the same thing I am doing. Therefore it was not me alone, but all beings in which my will exists as whole were together with me in hugging you. So when I do one more act with one who lives in my will, I give a new feast to the whole creation. And whenever there is a new feast, all move and stand at attention. When I am about to give you a kiss or tell you a word, so as to concur along with me, repeat my act, receive the new feast, and make the feast of their acts for you. Was it not a feast for you to feel the hug of my celestial Mamma, the hug of the light of the sun, of the waves of the sea, and even of the tiny little bird that stretched out its wings to hug you? My daughter, wherever my will is present, everything is present. Not one thing can escape it. Then I continued to follow its acts in the Supreme Volition, and my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, for one who possesses my will, it is as if she had the sun centered within herself, but not the sun that can be seen up in the sky, rather the divine sun, that very sun which is centered in God. Extending its rays, it centers itself in the soul, so she is the owner of light, because she possesses within herself the life of the light and all the goods and effects which it contains. Therefore she enjoys the communion of goods of her Creator. Everything is placed in common with one who possesses my will. Common is the love. Common is the sanctity. Common is the light. Everything is in common with her. Even more, since the Creator looks at her as a birth delivered by his divine will, she is already his daughter, so he enjoys, loves, and wants that his goods be in common with her. And if this could not be, he would suffer as a father would suffer, who, being extremely wealthy, finds himself in the impossibility of giving his goods to his true and faithful children. So unable to give what he possesses, he is forced to see them poor. This father, in the midst of the opulence of his riches, would die of sorrow, poisoned amidst his own bitternesses, because the joy of a father is to give and to make his children happy of his own happiness. If a terrestrial father who were not able to place his goods in common with his children can suffer so much, to the point of dying of grief, much more would the eternal Creator suffer, more than a most tender father, if he could not place his goods in common with one who possesses the divine Fiat, who, being his daughter, has her rights to possess the communion of goods of her father. And if it were not so, it would clash with that love which knows no limits, and with that goodness, more than paternal, which is the continuous triumph of all our works. Therefore, as the soul comes to possess the supreme Fiat, the first act of God is to place his goods in common with her, and centering his Son in her through the current of its light, he makes his goods descend into the depth of the soul, and she takes whatever she wants, and through that same current of the light which she possesses, she makes them ascend again to her Creator, as the greatest homage of love and of gratitude. Then that same current makes them descend once again into her. So these goods ascend and descend continuously, as the certainty and the seal of the communion existing between Creator and creature. Such was the state of Adam when he was created, until he sinned. That which was ours was his. The fullness of light centered in him, in view of the fact that his will was one with ours, brought him the communion of our goods. How we felt our happiness redoubled, on the part of creation, not because of anything else, as we saw Adam, our son, happy of our own happiness. In fact, since his will was one with ours, our will could pour our goods and our happiness in torrents upon him, so much so that, unable to contain it all because he did not have the capacity of his Creator, while being filled to the brim to the point of overflowing, he would make all the rest ascend to the one from whom he had received it. And what did he make ascend? His perfect love, which he had received from God, his sanctity, his glory, which he possessed in common with us, so as to almost match us with happiness, love, and glory. We gave him happiness. Happiness he gave to us. We gave him love, sanctity, and glory. Love, sanctity, and glory he gave to us. My daughter, to possess a divine will is something astonishing. The human nature cannot comprehend everything. It feels, it possesses, and knows not how to express. February 6, 1930, Volume 27, Effects of Living in the Divine Will and in the Human Will. How its way of operating in the soul symbolizes the creation. How it does little things first, and then the great ones. I continue my abandonment in the divine volition. My poor mind is always as though crowded with what regards a will so holy. Even more it seems to me that my thoughts plunge into its sea of light, and then come out like many messengers that brings many beautiful news from within that sea in which they have been. And one wants to say something, and another something else about that Fiat, that they glory in knowing and in receiving its life. And I delight in listening to them, and many times I cannot say with words the many beautiful news that my thoughts bring me about the sea of light of the divine will, and I feel the need for Jesus to guide me, to feed me the words, otherwise I would not be able to say anything. So while I was in the sea of the divine Fiat, My sweet Jesus, making himself seen in the act of helping me to change into words what my mind was thinking, told me, "My daughter, the effects of living in my divine will are admirable. My fiat keeps the creature always turned toward heaven, and it makes her grow, not of earth, but of heaven. And since my will is one with my same will that operates in the creature, this same will of mine places the creature in order with her Creator, and keeps manifesting to her who He is who created her, how much He loves her, and how He wants to be loved. And placing her before the divine reflections, it makes her Creator delight, by dint of reflections, in making grow and portraying His image in she who possesses the will of He who created her, and makes her will one with His. And since my fiat keeps her always turned toward heaven, nor does she have the time to look at the earth because she is absorbed by the Supreme Being, and even if she looked, all things convert into heaven, because wherever it reigns, my will has the virtue of changing the nature of things. So everything is heaven for the creature who lives in my divine will. She grows for heaven because the heaven of my divine will reigns in her soul. On the other hand, one who lives of human will is always turned toward herself, and by her looking at herself, the human will keeps uncovering for her what is human, and places her in the reflections of what exists in the low world, in such a way that it can be said that she lives of earth, and grows without the likeness of He who created her. There is such difference between one and the other, that if creatures could see it, all would love and yearn to live in my fiat, and they would abhor living of human will, and would hold it as the greatest misfortune, that make them lose the purpose and the origin for which they were created. It would happen as to a king who lays down his crown, his royal garments, descends from his throne and clothes himself with dirty rags, feeds himself with filthy foods, and lives in a stable together with the beasts of his passions. Would the lot of this one not to be cried over? Such is the one who lets himself be dominated by his human will. After this I continued thinking about the many things that my beloved Jesus has operated in my poor and little soul, His so many loving ways, such that, if I wanted to tell them all, it would be impossible for me. But who can say what I was thinking, and the reason why my little intelligence was as though crowded with what had happened to me in my existence? But while I was prey to so many thoughts, my highest and only good, Jesus, clasping me all to Himself, with unspeakable tenderness told me, "My daughter, my way of operating in your soul symbolizes the whole creation. Great work was the creation, but since our works are orderly, we contented ourselves with creating little things first, the heavens, the stars, the sun, the sea, the plants, and everything else. That is, little in comparison with the creation of man, who was to surpass everything and hold supremacy over everything. And when things must serve He who must master them and be their king, as great as they might be or appear, they are always little compared to Him whom they must serve. So after the universe was created and all things were at their place of order, waiting for Him around whom, like an ordered army, they were to line up so as to serve Him and obey His wishes, we created man. All created things, and His very Creator, poured themselves over Him to sing to Him our eternal loves, and say to Him, "We all have the mark of our Creator, and we pour it over you, who are His image." Heaven and earth made complete feast, and our very divinity celebrated with so much love the creation of man, that at the mere memory of it our love seethes so strongly that, overflowing, it forms immense seas around us. Now, the kingdom of my divine will is greater than the work of creation, and therefore it can be said, It is the call for our divine being to operate more than creation itself. So everything I did in your soul at the beginning symbolizes the creation. I wanted you all to myself and all mine, so as to be free to do what I wanted. I wanted the void of everything in your soul, to be able to lay my heaven, and the many sayings on the virtues were stars that, practiced by you in the way wanted by me, I used in order to adorn the heaven I had extended in you. Therefore I wanted to redo in you and be repaid for everything evil and unworthy that the human family had done. In order to call back the son of my divine Fiat, it was necessary to prepare with decorum she who was to receive as the first the life of my divine will. This is why then I made flow seas of grace, the most beautiful flowerings, almost as in the creation of man, in whom my divine Fiat was to reign. The same in you. Everything I did placed itself in waiting, like a divine army, to form the cortege of the Son of my eternal will. And just as in creation we abounded so much in creating so many things that were to serve man, but because this man was to let my divine will reign within himself, the same in you. Everything has been done so that my will would find its place of honor and of glory. This is why it was necessary that first I was to prepare you with many graces and teachings, as little things compared to the great Son of my divine volition, that with its many manifestations, while making itself known, formed its life in order to reign and form its first kingdom in the creature. Therefore do not be surprised. This is the order of our wisdom and providence, that does little things first and then the great, as cortege and as decorum of the great things. What does my divine Fiat not deserve? What is not owed to it? And what has not been done by it? Therefore, when it is about my will, or about making it known, heaven and earth prostrate themselves, reverent, and all adore in mute silence even just one act of my divine will. February 6, 1932, Volume 30. One who lives in the divine will becomes raised by God with divine features and ways. The course in the Fiat. The acts done in it are placed on the eternal scale and enclosed in the divine bank. My abandonment in the divine volition continues. I always feel myself the little atom that I go up and down as wandering in its acts, in order to find its and my life in its acts. And my atom never stops. It runs. It always runs, because I feel the extreme need to find life in the Fiat. Otherwise I feel that I cannot live without its life, and without its acts I feel fasting, and therefore I must run in order to find life and food. Even more because with an indescribable love the divine will waits for me in its acts, in order to prepare its food for its little daughter. But while my mind was lost in its light, sweet and sovereign celestial Jesus, making his little escape with his little daughter, told me, "Blessed daughter, how beautiful is your course in our will! And although you are the little atom, we can raise you as we want. Little ones can grow with our features that are like us. We teach our divine ways, our celestial science, in a way that she forgets the rough ways and the ignorance of the human will. For those that are great, they are already formed, and little or nothing can we redo. And then they are used to living as great, according to the human volition, and miracles are needed to destroy habits, if one can even be able to. On the other hand, the little ones are easy for us, nor does it cost us so much, because they do not have any radical habits. At the most they have some fleeting impulse that one little word of ours, a breath of our light, is enough so that she does not remember it any more. Therefore be always little, if you want that my divine will, acting as true mother, raises you, so that all the glory be ours and also yours. Now you must know that a repeatedly renewed act forms the habit, and since an act that never ceases is only of the Supreme Being, if the creature feels herself in possession of an act that always repeats, it means that God has enclosed his life, his way, in that act. A continuous act is life and divine act, and only one who lives in my divine will can feel in herself the power, the virtue, the miraculous strength of an act that never ceases, because having been raised by us, it is not easy to stray from our ways, and to not feel in herself the life and the continuous acts of he who has raised her. Therefore your running, always feeling the extreme need of finding our and your life in the Fiat, in its acts, it is we who run in you in order to remain in our incessant acts. And while we run, you run together, such that our acts that are in you have common life with our acts that are outside of you. And as you feel the extreme need, in the same way we feel the extreme need of love to make your littleness go around in all the acts of our Fiat. Therefore you, not being capable of containing them all in yourself, by your going around in them, you take part for however much more you can. Therefore you run. You always run. Rather, I say we always run, because there is no greater grace that I can give to the creature than making her feel in herself the virtue of a continuous act. So I continued to follow the acts of the divine will, and my beloved Jesus added, "My daughter, every time you form one of your acts in the act of my divine will, so many more bonds you form in it, remaining confirmed as many times for however many acts as you do in the divine Fiat, and it remains confirmed as many more times in you. And with every bond and confirmation that you make, my will enlarges its seas around you, and for confirmation, as seal, it places there one of its truths, one of its knowledges, and it manifests to you one more degree about the value that my will contains. But do you know what these bonds, confirmations, truths, knowledges, additional values that you come to know do in your soul? They make the life of my will grow in you. Not only this, but repeating your acts, they have so many more degrees of values for however many more you have known. Your acts become placed on the scale of divine value, and their value is as much for however much you have known, and for however much value has been communicated by us in your act, such that your act of yesterday, repeating it today, does not have the same value of yesterday, but has acquired the new value that we have made known. Therefore, the repetition of acts, accompanied by new truths and knowledges, day by day acquires new degrees of infinite, always growing value. We not only place the acts of the creature done in our will on an eternal scale in order to give them the weight of an infinite value, but we conserve them in our divine bank in order to give them 100-fold. Therefore, every time you repeat your acts, so many times your little money becomes placed in our divine bank, and therefore you acquire so many more rights of receiving from us. See, therefore, where the excess of our love reaches, that we want to make ourselves debtors of the creature, receiving the little money of her acts in our immense bank. Though we possess so much of it, still we love so much to receive the little tiny money, in order to give her the right of our giving to her of ours. At whatever cost, our love wants to have something to do with the creature. It wants to be in continuous relationship with her, and this by way of giving, and perhaps even of losing. Many times while we want to give to her, we want to let her know so many beautiful things of ours, We want to let her hear how very sweet and powerful our word is. And she shows herself cold, indifferent, if not also turning her back to us. And our love remains as defeated by the way of human ingratitude. But the little daughter will never do this, isn't that true? Your littleness makes you feel the extreme need of your Jesus, of his love, and of his will. End of February 6th. Fiat.